G'day, we're going to do some float loading just to show you how I like the horses to walk onto the float. I'll just point out before we get started about the flooring on the back of the tailgate here. Hopefully you might be able to see it there, but it's rubber matting and it's got raised nodules and it's very good for non-slip. If you'd like to see that in closer, you can have a look at my website and have a look at the float safety document that's there. It's not that you have to use it, but quite often I see horses slipping on surfaces that are supposed to be non-slip, and I have to be honest and say I've never found anything that comes anywhere near to this matting. So why give the horses a problem? Why cause them to be nervous when they're entering the float? I think it's a lot easier just to use some matting like that and overcome the problem. In terms of the handling of the horses, I always have a pair of rigging gloves, and they've got some sheepskin lining in them, and that is, if I ever have a problem with a horse, and I especially need to use them when I go and train horses, but if I have a horse that gives me problems, I don't want to be in a situation where I could burn my hands through the rope, or if the horse tries to run off where it would burn my hands. I want to feel like I'm in control, and this at least gives me that protection and gives me a bit more confidence that I'm not going to damage my hands. The other thing, I use a dressage whip. Shock horror. Some people say you shouldn't use whips, it's cruel for the horse, but the reality is that's not true. It's all about how you use the whip. And the whip, the reason I use it is it's an extension of my arm, which means I can keep myself safe and reach the horse's rump to tap if I need to get a bit of impulsion to go forward, and it's very light and easy to use. So yes, you need emotional control. There's no point being harsh and beating the horse. That's not what we want. We just want to be able to say to the horse, go forward, and keep ourselves safe. And that being light, it means that I can start it when I need to, and importantly I can stop very quickly, whereas some of the sticks that are promoted for horsemanship, I believe, are a bit too heavy for a lot of people to handle, and they're very difficult to stop and start in an effective manner. So that's why I use the whip. It's just so much easier to handle. It's not about beating up the horse. Okay, now with these, I rarely have to use them, because once the horse is trained, you basically never have to use them again. But what I do is I keep them in the car with me all the time, because you could never tell when a horse is going to have a rough trip and it decides it doesn't want to go back on the float. So I would use these just whilst over a couple of minutes we get the horse back on the float. The other thing about horses going in is that I believe that for horses it's a bit like us humans going up to a 30-story building and walking over the edge to look over the side. How would you feel about that? Especially if there was no safety rails there, would you feel secure and safe about doing that, or would you feel rather nervous? I think most people would agree they'd feel nervous. And for me, and I guess even for going into scary dark rooms, but for me this is a bit like the horse getting on the float. I think it's like that for the horses, even though that's a claustrophobic area compared to being on the top of a roof. Nonetheless, there's a fear and a bit of apprehension about it, and to me it makes sense to say that there's no good reason for the horse to actually go in the float. It's not a natural environment, so why does it want to go in there? So I think that we need to keep that in mind when we're dealing with horses getting in the float. Anyway, I'll get started. I'll stop yapping on, and we'll get these horses in.